All right, check this out. Thank you, Wyoming. Thank you. I'm not really leaving. That was risky, but that was awesome because I just played live to a packed house at the Peck Auditorium. And I'm not a professional musician, as you might guess. You know, sometimes we think of risk in terms of, win or lose, and that's not always the case. Sometimes it's both. For instance, I just played my harmonica. You're probably thinking that dude's sort of a dork. But you all clapped. And that's what I'll always take in my memory. When we risk, we always learn something. We always gain insight. We always see the world in a new way. And in fact, it helps us move when we feel stuck. At its heart, risk is really experiential in education. And that's been the basis of my career at the National Outdoor Leadership School and as an executive coach. We find that risk will take us anywhere we want it to go. And I believe learning experientially is the fundamental way in which we learn. And I also believe without risk, there is no innovation. There's no learning. There's no love. Risk requires all these things. As an expedition leader, I've had a career full of taking risks while climbing mountains or crossing crevasses like this. It's taken me to a lot of great places. And I've been able to see the world from a unique position, sometimes at the summits of peaks. I've also had the unique opportunity to work with the space shuttle teams and the scientists that are working in the high altitudes of space. And I've always found that risk is something to be explored. And I love exploration, and I love innovation. And it's been those sort of things that have carried me through my life. I remember when I was a child, I had a poster in my room, and it was a skier doing this crazy aerial maneuver way above the snow. And what I loved was there was a caption on the poster that said, "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all." And I loved that concept. And I really used it to guide me through the mountains as I went on through life, and also guiding my own experiences. But it wasn't until quite a few years later that I realized those words weren't spoken by a mountaineer or a famous skier. They were in fact spoken by Helen Keller, and she was looking at risk on a completely different level. Risk always leads us to new ways of thinking and being in the world. And a lot of times we think we don't know what we want or what we want to choose, and then it's going to be risky if we go this route or this route. But really, when we look in our hearts, we do know. And it's the choosing that becomes the risk. So tonight, I'd like to think about risk in a different way than the idea of risking money or the idea of risking doing something risky for adrenaline's sake. I'd like to think about risk in terms of what if we took risks with our minds? What if we took risks with our hearts? And what if we took risks of ourselves to be kind to somebody? So I ask you this. When's the last time you took a risk? I put that question out on the flip charts outside, and we had some representative answers. But when's the last time you really took a risk? For instance, when's the last time you took a risk of your mind, to learn something new. You know, we're in this auditorium of a college. Great learning takes place here, and students and families have risked much to come here. They've risked finances, they've risked time with their loved ones, time for themselves, all in the hopes of being able to gain something new that might actually be helpful in this world. Well, I'm thinking that within this frame, risk and learning doesn't just end here. There's just so much more learning to be done outside these classrooms. In fact, if you look out, as many stars as there are in the sky are as many things that we can learn about. And we think as we get older a lot of times that, you know, I did my learning. I did it in school. But learning doesn't really end there. But for a lot of us, as we age, we start to become complacent. And we think that basically getting up, going to work, coming home, eating dinner, watching TV, and then doing it all over again is the way to live. And I'm proposing that's not the way to live. I'm proposing that you should take risks. Because when we risk, we learn. When we learn, we innovate. It's just that simple. So I received a call from my dad just last week. It was really great. He wanted to tell me something that he had just learned. He's just gotten a computer, and he has been taking classes to learn how to use the computer. He's had tutors. He's looked at stuff online, and he calls me up, and he's excited. And he says, "Hey, John, I just found this out, but apparently on the computer, you need something called a modem or a router. Turns out I've been hitchhiking on somebody else's ride on the interwebs all these months." And I loved that my dad called me. And here's the deal. My dad's 88. And he's the model to me of lifelong learning. I hope I can do the same. You know, maybe it's time we take a risk to educate ourselves about something. So when's the last time you took a risk? I mean, when's the last time you really took a risk? When's the last time you took a risk of your heart? The last time to tell somebody how you felt about them. Last time to say something that really mattered to somebody. Last time to say, I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm happy. Last time to say, I really love you. Last time to say, nice job, without a critique to follow. When's the last time you did that? Well, I'd like to take a risk right now and tell my dear friends and loved ones in the audience that I love you deeply, and you're incredibly important to me. And I'm guessing there's roughly 200 other people in the audience that are thinking the same thing about their loved ones right now. You know, it's easy for me to do this up here publicly, to take this risk. And yet, it's so easy for all of us to do it. And it means so much to both me and to those that hear that. Perhaps it's time to take a risk of your heart. So I'm going to ask you, when's the last time you took a risk? When's the last time you really, really took a risk? When's the last time you took a risk of yourself to be kind to somebody else? You know, in Wyoming, the only buses that we have are those that take kids to school, or they're passing through going somewhere else. And so when I travel for work to various cities, I love to ride the public transportation and love to ride the buses because you get a really unique perspective of the city, and I find it's always a great adventure. It's like I'm on one giant expedition in my head the whole time it happens. So some time ago, I was on the 194 bus in Seattle, and I got on the bus, and I was walking down the aisle, and there was a dear senior woman sitting alone, and I passed her, and I felt compelled after I passed her to turn around and sit by her. So I asked her, do you mind if I sit with you? And she said no. And after a few minutes of sort of uncomfortable silence, we started talking. And she tells me that she likes to get up in the morning, hop on a bus, a random bus, and just see where it takes her, and get out, and in her words, take a look around and see what's happening in the city. My kind of gal. I liked her. Well, I talked with her some more, and it turns out she's got a brother that lives in Lander, Wyoming. It was a remarkable ride. She asked me if she could take me out to lunch. I said, sure. She told me, I'm 85, I'm not trying to pick you up. I said, that's all right, I'm taking anyways. And with this incredibly warm smile, she then told me with these beautiful distant memories of her husband who had passed on. And we rode on through the rain. Well, after lunch, a couple colleagues came by to pick me up, and she insisted that she buys them lunch too. And so here's the deal. If you ever go to Seattle, you should definitely ride the bus, because there's a good chance that you might end up sitting next to Amy. And if you do, you might get a free lunch. And better yet, she might become your friend. You know, she took a risk, and with her risk of kindness, she was so kind to this out-of-towner that it inspired me so much that I thought, I need to do that with people that I don't know either. And now, her kindness has made it into, this auditorium. So when's the last time you took a risk to be kind to somebody? I believe without risk, there is no innovation. There's no science. There's no discovery. But I also really believe that if you take risks of your mind, you take risks of your heart, and you take risk of yourself to be kind to somebody, you innovate yourself. And really, there is no greater payoff to a risk than to do that. So I'd like to end our time together tonight with a poem by a woman named Janet Rand. She is a school teacher in Chicago, or was, and the title of the poem is called Risks. To laugh is to risk appearing the fool. To weep is to risk being called sentimental. To reach out to another is to risk involvement. To expose feelings is to risk showing your true self. To place your ideas and your dreams before the crowd is to risk being called naive. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. But risks must be taken, because the greatest risk in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing, becomes nothing. He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he simply cannot learn, feel, change, or grow, or love. Chained by his certitude, he's a slave. He has forfeited his freedom. Only the person who risks is truly free. So, my friends, my colleagues, we have such a great opportunity here. And I appreciate the risks that you've taken with each other and you've taken with me. But here's the deal. We have so much more in life that we can risk. And it's not about our money, or it's not about doing some high-altitude climb that gives you an adrenaline rush. But we have great opportunities to risk every day. We have the ability to use our minds and learn new things. We have the luxury to be able to speak from our hearts. And we have the opportunity to be kind and take risks of ourselves. So I'm putting it out here. Will you take the risk with me? Just leap, and the net will appear. Thanks.